Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cyber Sensei, the definitive podcast for cybersecurity educators, brought to you by Cyberbit. My name is Sharon Rosenman. I'm the CMO at Cyberbit, and I am co-hosting, as always, with Mr. Adam Bricker. Hi, Adam. Adam is an international CIO and CISO and the co-founder of the Carolina Cyber Network and the Carolina Cyber Center. Pleasure to meet with you again for our second episode.
Hi, Sharon.
A quick reminder, if you're new to Cyber Sensei, what is this podcast about? This is the first podcast specifically focused on helping cybersecurity educators develop the next generation of cybersecurity talent. Every week we'll be joined by, or every month we'll be joined by a Cyber Sensei, an expert in cyber education, and various industry leaders who are going to help us understand both the educator's perspective and the employer's perspective. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. This is obviously a live session. You're all live, currently muted. We're going to have an open Q&A session in about 30 minutes after we have a short chat with our guest. You will be able to unmute and to ask questions live if you'd like to, or if you'd prefer, you can just type them into the Q&A section in Zoom. You can see a little Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom. And we will be sure to answer them during the Q&A part. So if you're more comfortable in typing the questions, then just go ahead and do that. And definitely do that during the session. If you have something in mind, you can just go ahead and type it in and we'll answer it later. The session will be recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel, the Cyberbit YouTube channel. That will be with video, and it will also be available as a recording on all the leading podcast platforms. You will get the links as a follow-up email to the podcast, and it will also be posted on the Cyberbit LinkedIn profile. So I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn to get regular updates on the recordings and on new episodes that are coming up. We'll post a link to the Cyberbit LinkedIn profile in the chat later on so you can see it. Adam, want to introduce our guest?
Sharon, thanks. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. I've known Dr. Seth Hamman for a couple of years now, but he's the director of the Center for the Advancement of Cybersecurity at Cedarville University, an associate professor. He's got a broad academic background, everything from a BA in religion to a master's in computer science, a PhD in computer science from the Air Force School. Dr. Hamman, would you introduce yourself? Tell them a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, Adam, thank you so much for having me. I love thinking about cybersecurity education. So to be in a group like this where I can say that without fear of being judged is awesome. So it's truly my pleasure to be here. I've been in cyber ed for about a decade. I started teaching at Cedarville in computer science, and then we started building in the cyber program that started out as a specialization. And a few years ago, we turned it into a first-class major called cyber operations. Which is the first of its kind in the state of Ohio. Our program's NSA designated as a National Center of Academic Excellence in both cyber operations, which we achieved in 2018. Pretty small group of schools that have that designation. I think today there are 22 in the nation. And then we're also designated as cyber defense as well. And we're ABET accredited in cybersecurity. So we've done a lot in the last 5 or 6 years, really, is where once we got that designation and working towards that. And so that's a little bit of my background.
That's very good. You're right. I think there's well over 500 schools now with the defense, but yeah, only 2025 with the operations. Congratulations, a lot. Well, today, I'm really looking forward to this because we invited you because there is appropriately a strong focus on technical skills in cybersecurity, of course. But in this case, we'll talk about the soft skills. I think these are the hard skills. In this case, we'll talk about what it means to be a cyber warrior in the sense of critical thinking. And maybe one of the number one skills we'll talk about today is adversarial thinking. So I know of your work, and I wanted to have you first explore a little bit of this branch of critical thinking related to game theory and how you came to see this as important to cybersecurity education.
Really, it came about in my PhD research at the Air Force's graduate school at nearby Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I was thinking about how we can protect the power grid and from a cyber attack, which is still an important question today. It was maybe really big on people's minds then. And we were looking at different techniques. And the bigger picture question, though, was, hey, we've got this huge infrastructure that we cannot perfectly protect. We all know there's no such thing as 100% security. But that's just blatantly true when you're trying to protect something like the power grid. And so I just, my mind turned towards, well, where might the attackers try to attack? What might they be thinking? How might they be planning an attack? And when you start getting into that way of thinking, which is adversarial thinking, you realize that strategy comes into play. And so game theory is the study of strategic reasoning. You have multiple players. They're trying to maximize their utility. They're looking at a series of choices. And what makes it strategic is that their choices are interdependent. So what I do impacts your utility values. What you do impacts my utility values. And in a security context, it's a zero-sum game. My gain is your loss. So studying game theory made a lot of sense to me. And so that's how I incorporated that into my dissertation. And then I thought, well, I'm teaching cybersecurity. Our students need to learn about this. So then I developed content that I teach in my cyber courses here at Cedarville.
Very cool. Now, most of us that are cybersecurity instructors, we teach here's the standards, here's the STIGs, here's the frameworks, here's defense side of the house. And then they also say, but there's the resilience side of the house. Defense meaning, right, I've got my castle, I'm defending my castle. The resilience side is, hey, what if the nefarious actor is already inside your castle? Now what are you going to do? So it's a bad day. And then you take it to the third level of adversarial thinking. How do you think like the attacker and how they're going to think? So if you could, how do you see the cyber professionals and students that think about defense? How do they see that? How do you see that different than how you think about the offense, the adversarial side? What are the key differences?
Well, I mean, it's two sides of the same coin. I mean, we all know that cyber defense, cyber offense. Here we do focus, since we're cyber operations, and this is like the operations of a military operation. That was a term coined by the NSA. So we are a little bit more offensively oriented here, but I think it's true whether you're defense or offense, you have to understand how the other side's thinking. It becomes a little bit more natural for the offender, the ones on the offense, than it does to the defenders, which I think that's why this topic is important to teach to the defenders. So like you said, we've got our castle, we're protecting our castle. We may be building our walls. We may make sure checking on our gold, make sure that our treasures are all there and everything's okay. But if we just focus all of our time on the technologies that we're using, the people, processes, and technology, and we don't take a step back and think, wait a second, there's human beings on the other side of that wall that are trying to get in here every day. What creative ways are they thinking about trying to get in here? What tools do they have at their disposal to get in here? What strategies might they be employing to get in here? So that all falls under the rubric of adversarial thinking. And we do well to lift our eyes off of the barriers and the bounty that we're protecting, and then think about the bad guy on the other side and get ourselves in their shoes. And game theory is just a very natural way for us to do that. It helps us to put ourselves in the shoes of somebody else and think about things from their perspective. And if we can do that, we might be able to anticipate better the types of attacks that might be coming our way. And then we might be able to defend ourselves from those attacks better.
It's kind of interesting when you mentioned that. I was thinking of the great quote from the great Charlie Munger, the partner of Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway fame, where he talks about, if you can't forcefully argue your competitors, your adversary side of the equation, then you probably aren't sufficiently competent to defend your own. But you went really quickly, and I appreciate that. You talked about adversarial thinking, but you also introduced this concept of gaming theory or game theory. Can you explore a little bit about what game theory is and how it was applied in other walks of life and business, and how you applied it here?
Yeah, it emerged in the field of economics. Actually, one of the fathers of computer science was also one of the fathers of game theory, John von Neumann. John Nash was another pioneer in game theory. He's a famous persona. But it was like 40s and 50s, and it rose out of economics because, again, you got interdependent decision making. You've got strategy. You think about the position of a CEO, having to make strategic decisions. Again, you get scarce resources. You have to allocate those resources as efficiently as you can, trying to get the biggest bang for your buck. Meanwhile, there's others that are also trying to, in your market, that you're trying to think about what they might do and then how that impacts what you might do. And in some ways, that's a zero-sum game. So really, that was the genesis of game theory, was the field of economics. But clearly, prior to that, military strategists were thinking these ways, thinking about, okay, how might we attack? How might they counterattack? How might they be defending against our attack? So this way of thinking for like a military strategist is just, you can go back and read Sun Tzu, Art of War, and he said, know thy enemy. that type of mindset was just the strategy of war. So even today in a military studies curriculum, like if you're at West Point or someplace like that, you're probably going to get some game theory. If you're in an economics program, you're going to get game theory. If you're in an MBA program, you're going to learn about game theory. Now, I think if you're in a cybersecurity course, you should learn about game theory. I'm not talking about, being an expert, but you need to have some notion of strategic reasoning. So that was really kind of my contribution. I think this is a blind spot. I don't think we're teaching our students to think this way, but I think they would benefit from having some exposure to this. So it's in the literature in cybersecurity. I wasn't the first person to incorporate game theory into cybersecurity related research. There's other papers out there. This is already happening. We're thinking this way anyway, but I think our students, even at the undergraduate level, need to know a little bit about game theory.
Yeah, it's interesting. Listeners to this podcast will often hear me say this quip that I stole. Let's just shamelessly steal the best of what others have already mastered, and let's apply it in our context. There's not a lot new under the sun, but that being said, you get your PhD and you are well read, you are well educated, you've thought about this a lot. I've seen you at a number of conferences, but where did you go to cull this information to create your program? And as you talk about that with the listeners here, let's get down to, as they say, brass tacks. How do you actually teach adversarial thinking?
Well, it seems to be understood in the community, and the other participants on this call I think this would resonate with them, that we should be teaching adversarial thinking. It's in the standards. We kind of talk about it. Clearly that's important. So, here I am, I'm doing my PhD. I'm also teaching here, starting a cyber program. And I know front and center, we got to teach adversarial thinking. What I realized is I didn't even really know what adversarial thinking meant. I don't understand the term. You can't impart what you do not possess. And if I don't have clarity around something, I can't really hope to teach it in a way that I can assess it and then measure it. It's not going to happen. So I went back and I studied some cognitive psychology because I wanted to know what it means to think, because that's a big part of that adversarial thinking. That's the second word there. We need to understand what thinking is. And there's lots of different models of thinking, but one of them is a triarchic theory that goes all the way back to Aristotle. And it has a kind of an analytical component, which is like your IQ, has a creative component that, authors and artists have in spades. And then there's a strategic component that we might just call that street smarts. And that's part of thinking. So then I started thinking, okay, so there's this model, there are these three divisions. Do they apply to cybersecurity? And I realized they do. There's an analytical component. That's the technological capabilities of our adversary. There's the creative component. Sometimes we call that the hacker mindset. Like that's what Bruce Schneier calls it, the hacker mindset, that creativity, that bending some technology in a way that make it do something unexpected. But then what I think is overlooked in today's curriculums is there's a strategic component. What's my defender thinking about? What am I thinking about? How can I get away with this? How can I do something unexpected? How can I cover my tracks? Those are all part of the strategy of cyber offense and cyber defense. So now I actually had a definition that has three parts, all that I can measure them. I can measure technological capabilities, I can measure creative perspectives, and I can measure strategic reasoning. And so that third part is really the game theory part. So that's all adversarial thinking. And that third component is where I do the game theory content, and I measure my students' ability to anticipate the strategic actions of adversaries.
I gotta say, Adam and Seth, when we work at Cyberbit, we work with industry and education quite a lot. But when we work with Fortune 500s and they're training on our platform and they're kind of preparing their cyber defense teams on our cyber range, and we talk to them every few weeks, and we ask them kind of what are you really missing if you were able to get better graduates, or if you're able to ramp up your team and build one aspect of your team, what would that be? And a lot of them don't say the ability to use a firewall or an EDR. It's actually to build critical thinking, to build strategic thinking, critical thinking, to be more creative, because responding to an incident depends on that. Doesn't always depend just on how to operate a firewall or how to operate an EDR or whatever, or an investigation tool, but it's actually on that. So and I think very few institutions have actually developed the capability which you have to develop those skills within the graduates. So I think the large group that we have here online today if they're asking themselves, okay, is this something that I need? Then I know that this is something that the industry really, really needs. And then I think the question is, have you been able to kind of to crack it? Have you been able to find this magic, this code that can actually, because I think a lot of educators are kind of thinking, how do I do that? This is so complex. There's no playbook for that. So I think if you can tell a little bit more about how you do that, and also if you've heard any feedback later on from graduate that, hey, this has really played well for me when I went to look for a job or on the job, that'll be very interesting to hear from my perspective, at least.
Yeah, great questions. I don't know that I've cracked the code on it. I have, I think, drawn attention to something that we might be missing. Again,
sure.
kind of a part of a critical thinking, which is more strategic reasoning. And really, it's a fundamental reorientation around, okay, cybersecurity, this is an adversarial conflict, period. If there's no adversary, there is no cybersecurity. I mean, IT is hard enough. I have to think about storms and tornadoes and failures and mistakes and errors. But cybersecurity is like, okay, yeah, all those things can happen, but you have an adversary that's creating the perfect storm where like 5 bad things happen at once. Now we have to prepare for that. And that's where you start getting into this adversarial thinking and especially strategic reasoning. We do well with the technological capabilities because it's pretty easy.
Right.
It's clean. We teach that in our classes. So I would think employers would say, okay, yeah, we told you we need them to know firewalls, they know firewalls. But to really future-proof our workforce, they have to have that critical thinking component. And so I did develop a module. I'm not saying that I cracked the code on this, but it's just an introduction to game theory. I'm not trying to make them experts, but again, it's more about changing their way of thinking or approaching problems, which is really what education's all about. There's a quote that says, education is what remains after you've forgotten everything you learned in school. And what that means is what that's getting to is it's just like a fundamental orientation about how you think. So in my little introduction to game theory, which is all cyber themed, obviously I'm teaching in a cyber class, but it's the rudiments of game theory. I really get into something called level K reasoning, which I think is very helpful for game theory. It's just for cybersecurity, even though it's just a sliver of game theory. To answer your second question, I have not done that. I've been teaching this for probably 6 or 7 years in my class. I have not done any kind of longitudinal study. I do believe that what I teach is sticking with my students because it's different enough. They know something about game theory. Most students are like intrigued by game theory. They don't really know it, but they just know something about it. Maybe they've heard of the Prisoner's Dilemma game or something. But I think just the idea that they learned about game theory in their curriculum in cybersecurity, it would make an indelible mark. That's kind of my idea, that sticks with them and helps fundamentally reorient them. And I think it would serve them well and their employers well. But no, I don't have any data like in a longitudinal study kind of way that would demonstrate that. I just would hope that would be true.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. We're hearing it from the industry all the time.
It's interesting. You brought up Aristotle earlier, and I was thinking, most people don't know this. Socrates, who then trained Plato, who then trained Aristotle. You think Socrates was a war hero in the Peloponnesian War. He was a very accomplished war veteran, and he set down his armor to then go spend the rest of his life developing the philosopher kings, his view of who he believed would be the most perfect leaders. Then you go down to two proteges later, where Aristotle took a lot of heat because he kept teaching you how to think, not what to think. People could just give me the answer. No, I need to teach you how to think, and that's what you're doing. So,
yes,
we ask tough questions on this podcast, and one of them is, I'd like you to come back and say, how do you teach it? And then as you answer that, how do you know that they've learned it? How do you validate that this works?
And I have published this in the literature, and if you publish something around cybersecurity education, you need some kind of an experiment. I mean, you need to assess this. Does this really work? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about education theory. How do you know that students have learned something? I came up with an assessment instrument that I give to my students on the first day of this module, which is essentially, it's an attack scenario. And I say, okay, here's your infrastructure, defend your infrastructure. Tell me how you would allocate your scarce resources. And almost without fail, my students, and this is so predictable. I've done this so many times now. They just focus on the things they're trying to protect and the value of the things they're trying to protect. And that's the thing that drives their protection allocations. So I give them that on day one, first thing. And then I teach them some rudiments of game theory. And it's not a whole course, it's a week. So it doesn't take a ton of time. I just give them the rudiments of game theory, which I keep coming back again and again and again. Game theory is about putting yourself in the shoes of the other player. You have to look at the situation from their perspective, think about what they're going to do, and then that informs what you're going to do. That's how game theory works. That's how you learn game theory. So I drive that point home, and then I give them the same exact exercise. So I set up a pre-test, post-test experiment at the end of the module, same exact. And I, by the way, I don't give them any answers. I don't tell them how they did. They don't even know they're going to take the assessment instrument again. But I give it to them again, and I can see what they did on the post-test. And almost without fail, their mindset changes. They start thinking less about, all right, these are the values of the things I'm trying to, my assets. And they think more about, wonder what my attacker's thinking about when he's thinking about attacking my infrastructure. How is he going to allocate his resources? And they've come up with better allocations of our defense resources. And it is noticeably better. The p-value is statistically significant. So that really excited me when I found that. And the question I'm asking is, does this content improve my students' ability to anticipate the strategic actions of an adversary? And that's what my assessment instrument, which I've validated, that's what it measures. And then you can it's a pretty easy statistical test, a t-test to compare the two. And then you get a p-value. And if it's less than 0.05, you know that, yes, that statistically significant changes occurred. Another researcher found this, by the way, all this curriculum is freely available. It was developed, the NSA gave me a grant to develop this about 5 years ago. It's in the public domain. It's at a website we might talk about called Clark.center. The top level domain name is center, Clark.center. And you can look at adversarial thinking and you can see the assessment instrument and everything out there. But someone has done that, and even without me knowing about it, independently validated the same results that I see every time I teach this in my class.
Seth, that's all, and to put my cards on the table, I think you probably know this, but being lazy, I just went to the Clark Center site. I stole all of your materials. I taught it in inner city Atlanta a couple of times. I also saw the demonstrable improvement, the measurable improvement. But as much as anything, I could just listen to the way they talk about the topic, the subject and then when we put them in the CyberBit platform, and we actually independently had another person run a competition where we competed the students against experts from, well, I won't mention the names, but very successful companies in the Atlanta area. And the students beat the professional teams because of the way they think. So thank you for what you've already done for my program and others. So that's just awesome. Mm-hmm. But, I was lazy and stole it from you, and I'm looking forward to, in a future podcast, there's a third branch of this kind of thinking called integrative thinking that I hope to come back to. But when I look through your materials, and I'd like to ask you if you could unpack this just a little bit more. There was this, you talked about the triarch, and there's like this intellect and creativity and strategic reasoning. Could you unpack those three a little bit more about what you're looking to develop in the students in those three areas?
Yeah, so if we think about adversarial thinking, what does it mean to think? Okay, there's this analytical component, that's book smarts. I think in cybersecurity education, that means we have to give our students, they have to know the tools of the trade. They need to know the techniques. They need to know the technology. For my program, they need to know low-level programming, software reverse engineering, how to reverse engineer networking protocols, all those kinds of things. That's really exercising the analytical component of their brain, which is book smarts. We do that. I think most cyber programs do that great. I mean, that's really the main emphasis. The middle part is the creative perspectives. I'll be honest, that one's hard. I mean, that's like teaching somebody how to write fiction or to art. It's kind of like, man, is that innate or can I really develop that? There are things you can do to bring out creativity. I think we do this in cyber ed kind of through case studies of attacks, maybe capture the flags exercises where we're trying to get them to think creatively. How can they attack this in a way that's unpredictable, or that makes a unique connection? So that one's hard to teach. What I like about the strategic reasoning, which is that third part, which is the street smarts, and that's actually pretty easy to teach. I mean, that's what game theory is. And we've been teaching that. That content already exists. So I just took some rudiments of game theory, made it cyber themed, and I built it in a way that kind of makes sense so that they know they're conversant in game theory. We actually start with analytical game theory, and we talk about the prisoner's dilemma game and some other things. Then we get up to behavioral game theory, which is where we end. And that's giving them an ability to think more strategically. So that's really the unpacking for me of adversarial thinking. And the strategic reasoning is just kind of that one module. Technological capabilities is kind of like in every class by default. And then the middle one, the unconventional perspectives, I think that's a harder nut to crack. And I think that would be a good one to talk about for a future podcast. How do you get your students to think creatively?
We unpacked creativity in our program into curiosity versus creativity, curiosity leading to it. And you're right, maybe in a future topic, but I'll drop a nugget that worked amazing for us. We would ask the students every day to find something that is common every day, but you have to ask yourself, why didn't that get invented before now? Right? It didn't require some new technology, some new sex and sizzle. It just was like somebody thought about the same problem we've all had, but didn't come up with it. And I'll give you an example. I was raised on a farm and I crawled into the back of a pickup like an idiot. Like every other kid, I would climb on the tire, on the bumper and get in the back, And then it wasn't until 80 years after the pickup truck was invented, somebody said, why don't I just put a little notch in the bumper so you can just step in? Somebody was curious and thought about a new way to solve the problem. And I'm like, as soon as I saw it, I went, I never thought of that, but it is a way of thinking. It's a pattern of thinking. Seth, thank you so much for this insight. And thank you for putting your materials up at the Clark Doc Center. There's a question that Jacob posed here where he says, do not disruptive technologies make cybersecurity difficult because there's new technologies every day? How can we keep up with it? And I think you touched on that a little earlier, but could you double click on that for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, that one's definitely, so there's two problems. One, we have a cyber skills gap. We know that. And cyber education is the solution behind all the solutions of the cybersecurity crisis that we're in right now. We know that, and we're doing that. We're going to K through 12. We got community colleges. We got boot camps. We got like the thing you were doing in Atlanta. We got 4-year colleges, et cetera. The other problem is future-proofing the workforce. I mean, we need to put grads out there that can work day one, but they can also work 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And so that's where the critical thinking really comes in. We don't know what tomorrow's challenges are. They might be ready on day one, but what about on year 2, when something that we hadn't even known existed all of a sudden comes into existence? So if we can really impart critical thinking, then the student can adapt. I mean, that's basically they can innovate. They're hopefully will have that love of learning. So they're constantly keeping up. They're wondering what's around the next corner. They're curious, they're learning. And in my case, I have 4 years where I can cultivate that. And it's going to be crucial for their success so that they can deal with, those challenges of tomorrow.
And Sharon and his team at Cyberbit have been giving this a tremendous amount of thought. Sharon?
That's exactly I think very often, and then just going back to kind of, we come from the area of simulation, cyber ranges, and giving a realistic experience to students and to professionals in terms of preparing them. So we work with both ends, and kind of when in our first conversations, let's say with let's say financial institutions, the question is, so am I going to train using my exact same tool stack? Do I have to use the exact same SIM, firewall, EDR, WAF, or whatever I have in order to prepare my team? And our answer, and sometimes it's hard to communicate that in the beginning, and say, look, you could, but you know what? If you use any set of tools, but you teach the best practices, you simulate the process, the teamwork, the soft skills, obviously adversarial thinking, critical thinking being one of them, but even teamwork or working under pressure, all those set of soft skills, and you learn what is the methodology of using the stack. You will, if you change the firewall tomorrow, and you don't want to stick to one and know just one. You want to understand how to approach it from a process perspective, from a thinking perspective. And they later on acknowledge that and say, look, you know what? We taught the basics, like the fundamentals, the skill sets, etc. And then when we had to change a tool or to adopt a new tool or a new technology, it was much easier, because rather than learning a tool, we're learning the approach, we're learning the thought process. So
yes,
it's something we see all the time, and we hear that from the industry as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And we don't know what all those future, this
Right.
blew my mind. ChatGPT, the CEO, Sam Altman, was having like a kind of a little Twitter repartee with Elon Musk. And they were talking about, oh, wow, AI is getting pretty powerful. And they started exploring strong AI, which is something I think a lot about too. Is that possible? Where are we with that? And Elon Musk kind of teased, is this kind of getting us to the strong AI era? And then, what are the implications? And then Sam Altman wrote in a Twitter thread, I'm scared about the implications of this for cybersecurity. I mean, out of nowhere, Sam Altman starts talking about ChatGPT, kind of what's going on with AI right now. And then he gets to cybersecurity, like in the next breath.
Yeah.
That's what he was worried about. And so like, I'm like, man, I'm worried about that too.
Just this morning, I read just this morning, I read the intel report about the Russia hacker group that is using ChatGPT for just that purpose. Yep. Seth and Sharon, just real quick, we have another question. Deborah poses a good one. And Seth, we talked about this earlier. Seth, you had a simulation of the Colonel Blotto game. Any plans to re-enable that?
Yes. So that is already, I do have a website that it's not a good website. It's something I made. And so I only put it up when I need it for my experiment. So Deborah, I don't know, we can talk. I actually just need to create it proper, but it was something that I spun up really quickly and I don't trust, and it's not cyber secure, I don't even think. So I only usually put it up for like 10 minutes at a time when I expose it to the big bad internet. But yeah, the Colonel Blotto game is one of the big games that I teach, which is the model of scarce resource allocation. It models cybersecurity pretty well.
Like the Red Dead Redemptions. Seth, I like to try and close with this question, and then Sharon may have some, but what questions should I have asked you I wasn't smart enough to ask you that you think our audience would be interested in?
Oh, let me think. I don't know. You not being smart enough, that's a tough one to ponder. I think we touched on the big things that I wanted to talk about. I mean, the centrality of adversarial thinking to cybersecurity, we cannot miss that. And I do think we are at risk of missing it sometimes. I mean, if there's no adversary, there's no cybersecurity. So just recognizing that and having that be in the forefront of our mind at all times. Another big one and we talked about this kind of before the call, is just, isn't it a great time to be involved in cybersecurity education right now? I mean, this discipline is coming of age before our very eyes. Yeah. And I've been working in this space for like maybe the last decade, and just seeing the resources, seeing what's going on in private industry with platforms like Cyberbit and others coming and having a product, and then government investing and giving, grants to develop curriculum. And it's an amazing time to be part of a discipline where in my intro to cybersecurity class, I'm thinking, all right, what do I teach? How do I teach it? And the answer is not so straightforward, because it's not like Calc 1. We kind of know that one. You're not going to innovate when you teach Calc 1. But intro to cyber, there's room for innovation. There's room for improving the status quo, because we're all figuring this out. So having this forum, the Cyber Sensei podcast, workshops and other things where we see one another, to me, this is a great community, and we're pioneering, and our students also are into something that's really fun. It'd be like being in computer science in the 60s, before computer science technically existed as an academic discipline. I mean, there's a lot of fruit. There's a lot of directions to go in. There's a lot of conversations to be had. And so to me, that's the fun of it. And I really enjoy that part of cyber ed, the era that we're in.
Very cool. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a big fan of Winston Churchill, but I have to admit, I don't remember if he was writing about Disraeli speaking in the House of Commons of the Lords. But anyways, a quote I think attributed to Churchill, which is something like, "To improve is to change, so to be perfect is to change often." Mm-hmm. And you're teaching people how to think, not just what to think. Yeah. It's a skill to learn how to learn, but not taught in a lot of schools. How do you learn? And how do you reinforce that? So when they leave, you're right, they're going to forget a lot of the facts and figures, but they're going to remember how to think. So thank you for being such an important part of our industry and giving that gift to our industry, and selfishly to me and my programs. Mm-hmm. Seth, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time today. Sharon, any final questions for our guest today?
So first of all, before final questions, just to remind the audience that we'll open up for Q&A shortly. So think about your questions and prepare them, type them in. And this is the time, if you have anything you want to ask Seth live, to raise your hand. We'll shortly start, if you'd like to, and we'll start unmuting you and letting you ask your questions live. So take a moment to think of what you wanted to ask. I think I'm coming maybe from a more simplistic angle. First of all, as a veteran in the space, what would be the maybe one or two main resources you would direct the audience to learn just to improve what they do to be better in their careers, besides yourself, anyone to follow or any resource to learn and just become better educators, any forums, or is there anything that you would recommend?
I'm a huge fan of Bruce Schneier. I don't know if you guys follow him or not. He's so thoughtful. First of all, he's a first-class cryptographer. So he's got all, he's been in academia. He knows that side of it, but he's also worked with industry. He's a thinker. And I would encourage people to read anything that Bruce Schneier writes. And another thing that I think is helpful is just staying up to date with what's going on in the world of cybersecurity, which is hard to do. Krebs on Security is a resource that I go to. Brian Krebs, he writes, it's pretty easy to understand.
Yeah, of
course. So
I would recommend him too.
Shahar, if you can find, I don't know if we'll be able to post it on the chat.
I agree with you.
Bruce Schneier and share it then on the chat, and we can later on share it. But yeah, I agree with you by 100%. I have the audience is a little bit shy on wanting to ask live, but we do have a couple of written questions. And again, if you have more, this is the time. And if you want to speak up, then just click on the raised hand icon and we'll open up your microphone. The first question, thank you very much. So the link for Bruce Schneier was posted, so you can see it in the chat. We've got a question from Sri. I hope I understand it correctly, but are there any CTFs conducted? Will CTFs help improve skills? So I can later on speak to cyber leagues, which is something that we run a lot, but from Seth's perspective and to your specific domain, have you seen impact of CTFs? Have you been CTF, i.e. capture the flag, if you're not familiar, a capture the flag event? Have you been running any of them? Have you been seeing the impact of them on skill levels?
Yeah. I haven't measured it. And maybe you guys have it, Cyber. I mean, I don't need to measure it. I know it. I just intuitively, we know it works. It's creating live simulations of like a real cyber event, and to get our students in that where they're feeling some stress, where they're thinking on their feet. So that would be an attack defend style of capture the flag, which those ones are a little bit more rare because it involves live red team action. And so it takes a lot of preparation to get a team ready for that, and then even to run the competition. At the collegiate level, the big one is called the National Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, or the CCDC. And I would recommend any program out there to get a team and then gear up for that contest, which is a live red team, blue team, and there's the state competition, the regional competition, the national competition, and then there's a lot of other what we call Jeopardy style capture the flags. Well, this is where you have an infrastructure, you're basically have some puzzles to solve. You find some flags, which may just be a string of text, and then you can input them, and then you get points. And the skill level varies. You could work in teams or alone on that. One of the main one I think in college ed right now is called National Cyber League. There's many of them. I don't know that I would endorse any particular one over another one, and there's more that come online all the time. In the CAE community, which I'm a part of, there's the CAE Cyber Games, but that's the Centers of Academic Excellence Cyber Ed community, and there's a dozen more that are coming online this year. So I'll let you, Sharon, talk about.
Talk more about I can absolutely recommend a Cyber League. Again, selfishly, one that Cyberbit is actually launching for the second year this year for a collegiate audience. We've been running it for quite a few years, but really focusing on students in the last few years. And it's called the ICL, the International Cyber League. And Shahar, if you can share the link, the unique part of that is that it's actually not a CTF. It's basically putting students in a cyber range and having them play against a simulated attacker on a real world attack. So take a ransomware attack or anything else. So students would actually get placed in an arena, a virtual arena that looks like a corporate network. an attack will start running in that network simulated by some sort of an AI, and the students they won't know what's happening, but they will actually be asked to perform not just in individuals. There will be a part where they do like individual challenges, but also to do the teamwork. And that's a very unique aspect, which is basically putting them in situation that's very close to a cyber incident that they will experience when they're part of an incident response team, like junior stock analyst or anything that they do once they graduate. Was a very interesting event. We're going to run that for the second time this year. Plus, it's also a great way to assess their actual performance in a real world situation. So that's kind of cool.
Those types of competitions, they're pivotal for, cyber ed. Some of the best practices in cyber ed, you have to do capture the flags. You have to do hands-on labs. I mean, these are just the norms that are emerging that we just all recognize. And so things like that, whether it's an extracurricular activity at your school or it's part of a class, we have to take advantage of those. And there's many great resources out there.
Yeah, Sahar's going to put something in the chat session here in just a few minutes, but I like Ed Scotus at CounterHack has been doing the Holiday Hack Challenge for
that's right,
20 years or something. It starts off very simple and it's very fun. Boy, but you really have to start thinking to get to the next level. He is, and he of course is one of the best penetration, attackers and attackers advantage kind of guys in the entire world. So he runs a really good one.
I got to take one of his classes, and he's a phenomenal. So he's a huge asset. Yeah,
he was my keynote speaker at my conference every year.
That's great.
Sharon, we have a few more questions. He's on mute.
Yeah, here I am. Sorry about that. A couple of questions for both of you, actually. So how do you attract women and minorities to cybersecurity? A question from Chris. So I don't know, Adam says, I'm sure you both have an angle on that.
I can go first, Adam, just real quick. I think one of the big things is getting rid of bad stereotypes for about what cybersecurity is and what it looks like. And I think that some of those stereotypes are gender biased. If we can make cybersecurity more inclusive, talk more about the different ways to be involved in cybersecurity, the different benefits, where it's not just like the hacker in the hoodie in the parent's basement, which I think is a gender biased stereotype that just turns some people off. They don't even think about wanting to go into this field because that's just not who they are. But it turns out their skill set and the things that they're interested in actually do have a role to play in cybersecurity. They just didn't connect the dots. So if we can make cybersecurity interesting, if we can help them to see how important it is, and then we can also help them to see that it's inclusive, I think we can help work towards the minorities and female representation in cybersecurity. But Adam, love to hear your take.
First of all, I agree with what you said. I think sometimes we overcomplicate this. One of which is, and I have had personal experience with my own mistakes, but my own successes. I'm a young Black woman from North Georgia. Do I see myself in that role? Is this the gift I want to give my future self? And if I can't envisage myself in that role, I don't have somebody else who's blazed that trail before me, then it's really tough. But the second thing is, I don't think you entice to pull them in the industry. You go in and meet them where they're at and show them that there's a neurodiversity that they bring to this industry. And I'm a snarky old guy. I'm like, hey, it's old white guys like me that when I was building systems at Southwest Airlines and Yum and others, I was not thinking about cybersecurity. So the neurodiversity they bring, where they can bring that other way of thinking about the industry, is super important. In fact, we will not survive and succeed without it. And as I said to a lot of my kids in the inner city, you learned the most fundamental element of cybersecurity that I did not. I was raised on a small farm in Central Texas. I never worried about trust. I never worried about being danger running down the street. I never worried about these things. It just wasn't in my consciousness. I learned it the hard way. But they grew up viscerally understanding who you can trust and how trust is formed. They have a way of critically thinking through 2 and 3 steps ahead that a lot of others don't. So I think you go in and meet them where they're at. And then, of course, you have others that speak to them to show them that cybersecurity, as you said, it's not the maladjusted white kid in their parents' basement with a hoodie. No, this is men and women of professional and critical thinking skills that have learned how to do all the different skills and careers in cybersecurity. But I think you go meet them where they're at, show them that they're part of this journey and how much we need them.
Good.
So, Chris, I hope that answered your question. And again, if not, just let us know. got quite a few nice set of questions coming up. So questions from Matthew. Have you thought about how to help your students lead groups in red team or blue teams or adversarial thinking in mixed teams when they graduate? I teach grad students that are young managers, and this is valuable to them, but they struggle helping their teams. That's very typical. Interesting question.
That's a tough one. I mean, I think some of these components of adversarial thinking that I talked about, the technological component, the kind of hacker mindset component, and then the strategic reasoning component, you could help students kind of think about roles on a team where maybe some of them have certain strengths that others don't. So maybe, you know, the technological component guy might be really good with the technology, but he might need some help with kind of the street smart side or with the creative perspective side, and just helping them appreciate that, hey, this is a team sport. We're better as a team than maybe any one of us is individually. That's about all I have for that. I don't know if Adam, you want to add anything.
I think, and by the way, I guess one simple answer is train as a team or learn as a team. Don't just learn as individuals. Make sure that some of your curriculum is devoted, if you can take the time to do that, is devoted to team play. And again, we're seeing this within our higher education customers that are implementing cyber ranges in their program. They're actually running team play exercises, which create completely different graduates that have actually done this as a team. And that's exactly the point. It's a team sport. If it's a team sport, you cannot just learn as an individual. There is a layer which is individual skill development, and there's another layer which is obviously the team skills. That's completely different. It's very interesting to see, by the way, a cybersecurity team that has never trained as a team trying to run an incident for the first time. We see it as a team. You see someone suddenly takes lead, not necessarily the right person, then someone else takes over, and then after a few times, you see it like a good basketball team starting to work like a well-orchestrated team, and it's just a matter of doing it again and again, a few times.
That's good.
All right. Anything else, Adam, from your perspective, or move on to the next question?
Well, it's another area we sometimes forget as educators, and this is for like young managers as well. The three finest forms of learning are debate, gaming, and stories. But the ritual is the oldest form of human connection. So if you want them to learn and be better managers to teach their teams, use games. In fact, one of our future podcasts, we're going to show you a pretty fun game that helps do this. Create rituals, because it's about creating a mental model. And it doesn't happen because you went to a training class for a day together, because you created rituals and habits that they can form. And in future podcasts, we'll talk about how to drip those kind of debates, gaming, and story to help build the critical thinking and also build them as a collaborative team. It doesn't happen in a one-time training session, in my humble opinion.
Agree by 100%. Move quickly because I want to respect your time. We've got about 11 more minutes, and I have a question from Zinli. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Very interesting talk. Thank you very much. I wonder if you can share some of the materials you use in your class of adversarial thinking. I don't know, Seth, is there any resource or any place they can learn a little bit?
Yeah, I would definitely go to clark.center. Again, center is the top level domain name, and you can find all my curriculum, and it is built for educators. It's not just kind of like a course that students take, but it has notes, it has the background theory, it references articles. Check it out, and there's quite a bit that you can explore in there.
We shared it on the chat earlier, so you can scroll up in the chat and you'll see it. So thank you for that. From a question from Jacob, pretty important and high level question. What are the skills necessary to develop cybersecurity? Mechanical, civil, electrical, and other fields approach game theory in different ways to inject into cybersecurity. So I'm not sure I understand the question, but I guess maybe it's what are the skills needed for different areas of cybersecurity? I'm not sure.
I mean, when you think about game theory, there's a lot of different types of games. There's categories of games. There's one category called security games. So that's probably the one most helpful for cybersecurity. Beyond that, I don't know how to answer the question, but that's kind of where I focus.
You can clarify. Jacob, if you could clarify, and we'll find. Yeah,
I was, my undergraduate was in aerospace engineering. My master's was in applied physics. And so the mental model I had was, give me an input, I'll put it through a process, and I will get the same answer every time. That's the way mechanical, electrical, civil engineers, that's the way they think. No problem with that. But in cybersecurity, the mental model is more like that of an economist. Bizarre to say that. What does an economist do? they try and change your behaviors based on the velocity of money. And we're trying to change people's behaviors, end users, our own, based on the movement and velocity of trust. And so it's more like that kind of a mental model. We're trying to get people to think critically about that world, because it's not a deterministic world, it's a probabilistic world. That would be my counsel to the individual. Jacob.
All right. So we got 3 more questions. We still got a few more minutes. So I'll start from one that I think is more challenging. How do you address insider threat from a, wow, that's a very specific question. How do you address insider threats from a game theory perspective, which actually is an interesting question. An insider?
And that's actually my exercise. It is an insider threat exercise. So I mean, I tell a story. A lot of game theory, there's a story, you know, like the prisoner's dilemma. There's really what's going on with the fundamental strategic component, but you got to tell a story to kind of make it come alive. Like the Colonel Blotto game, or two colonels that are trying to allocate troops to battlefields. But in the one that I came up with, my main exercise, which is called data breach, it's an insider attack. So you have a person that has access to a system that is not securable, but it's auditable. Maybe it's an old mainframe or something like that, and the access controls are immature. And so you can't really rely on the access control mechanisms, but you can audit accesses. And so, and you have an insider that you think might be, you know, stealing files and selling them on the black market. This is a story I tell about data breach. And it's like, all right, how do you allocate your log file auditing? Because you can't audit every file, you can't do everything, but where do you concentrate your time? So I think insider attack, any kind of scenario in cybersecurity, you can create a game theoretical story around and help people to think strategically about that particular component.
We got a couple of questions that are more from the graduates or from the student perspective. So some of them are asking for more lecture notes or materials. So I would suggest just to connect with Seth on LinkedIn and ask directly. And if that works for you, then of course, I'm sure you'll share whatever you can. So there's a couple of questions on that. Another question from a graduate: what advice for newly graduated network engineers that aim to become a pen tester down the road? Again, very specific kind of professional questions. Do you have any insight on that, Adam or Seth?
Adam, you go first on that one.
Wants to be pen tester. Yeah, Adam.
Yeah, I think there's 3 things here. One of which is there are some of the classic certifications to go for. EC Council has a good one, you know, CompTIA. But and if you have the money and your corporate involved, the SANS course are very expensive but very good. But there's the other approach, which is going to resources that I like a lot, like John Strand at Black Hills InfoSec, where you go to back through some of his YouTube videos, and he teaches you how to set up home networks and how to set up systems using open source, low cost stuff, $50 to $100, and then how to attack it and how to think like it. And then to get into the career, because network engineering is mostly about defense, pen testing is obviously most about trying to penetrate and be the attacker. But there's pen test and then there's pen test. Those that hit websites and following the OWASP top 18 or 20 as they call it now, and those that follow the strategies. But it is a pattern of thinking. And the other one I like is Dave Kennedy at Trusted Sec also has some good materials out there. And of course, Ed Scotus has taught a lot of this. Those are the 3 that I shamelessly go steal from. But then go find small nonprofits, small companies to volunteer your time with, to get your chops about what it's like to actually do this in the real world. There's an ethical dilemma to this we don't have time to go into today about having permission to do this. How far can you go, the white hat, black hat? Look those up from John Strand. I love his materials on the internet, the classic certifications, but then go find somebody to do the real work for and give back so that you've got the real world chops. Because when you go into an interview, they're going to be able to tell pretty quickly, can you speak the language? Are you part of my tribe?
I can't improve on that answer. That's great.
All right. So I think that concludes the questions. I don't see any live requests, but there was a very interesting set of questions. So I hope you learned from that. And I would like to thank you, Seth, Adam. That was very educating for me. I learned a lot. And I want to thank the audience for the time, just in terms of if you'd like to listen to the podcast, within a couple of days, will be available on all leading podcast platforms and on YouTube. and we will share the link with you. And again, it will also be available on the Cyberbit LinkedIn profile. We've shared it earlier, so you should certainly follow Cyberbit on LinkedIn to get updates on future podcasts and other cyber education topics and receive updates. And of course, connect to me, to Adam, or to Seth on LinkedIn, and feel free to ask any other questions. I want to give you a heads up on the next episode, which will be quite interesting. We're going to be inviting a guest from a leading financial institution in the cybersecurity organization, who is going to provide the industry perspective of what would an ideal graduate they would want from the cybersecurity manager's perspective. A very interesting conversation. So I encourage you to join and hear and kind of what does the industry want from university in cybersecurity. So would love to see you all there. And that's it. Adam, any last words? Seth?
Thank you.
I do have Bori asked a really good question here about.
There's more questions
switching
now.
From deterministic to probabilistic.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people wouldn't expect this, but you have to, there's no substitute for time on task. And if you just spent the last 15 years or 10 years of your life in education and career thinking deterministically like a petroleum engineer, this is not going to be trivial. But I love Annie Duke's book. Go look at her book. Go listen to her interview with the Knowledge Project with Shane Paris about, remember, good things can happen to bad people. Bad things can happen to good people. And a good decision can have a bad outcome, and a bad decision can have a good outcome. So it is about probabilistically, but you are committed to the discipline of how to think in a way that weighs the probability. Those are the places I would start to think about it. And I'm praying for your journey, because it will not be an easy one, but it can be done. If I can do it, you certainly can.
All right. Anything else, Adam, Seth, to conclude?
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very, very much. I enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your week and a great weekend.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, everybody.